We have made it to the offseason here in year number 1 at the Chicago White Sox franchise here on MLB The Show 25. After winning a league-low 59 games here in Season 1, this is our opportunity to really shake up this roster, and I have a feeling this team is going to look drastically different from now going to the end of the video. So how exactly did we finish as the worst team in the league? Well, for starters, we had a pretty bad offense. Third to last in runs, dead last in hits, second to last in average, last in doubles, 24th in home runs. We were towards the middle in walks, which is respectable. What's not respectable is we had the third most strikeouts. So all of that would total for dead last in slugging and 24th in on-base percentage. The offense really was not good this year, but the position players might have been even worse in the field. 29th in fielding percentage, 27th in errors. It's pretty clear the guys that we were trotting out there every day were not cutting it. The pitching was the strength of the team, yet we still finished 28th in ERA. I do feel like the rotation showed a lot of positives for us this year. We got a great season out of Drew Thorpe, who made the All-Star team. We've got some real upside with guys like Noah Schultz, Hagen Smith, and maybe guys who are currently on the roster like Jonathan Cannon, but overall the pitching still needs a lot of work. We allowed the second most runs in all of baseball. We were towards the bottom in hits allowed, bottom half in home runs allowed, the third most walks allowed, the sixth least amount of strikeouts. There really were not many strengths to this team, and even if the rotation was a positive, it was still one of the worst in all of baseball. This is exactly what we signed up for, though. We knew that it was going to be a piece of work, and that's exactly what this team is going to continue to be. So over the last day or so, I've been working on my ratings across the league. As I mentioned earlier in the year, I want it to be more performance-based, and I want to reward young guys for playing well. Take a guy like Junior Caminero, for instance, who only played half the year due to injury, but when he played, he was really good, and he is on a fast track to being one of the best players at his position in the league. I boosted his rating by about, I think, 3 or 4 to where he can become one of the best players at his position quickly. Bryce Terang with the Brewers had an unbelievably good season. He's been a good player in the past. It was really about if the offense develops, he's going to be one of the better players in the league. He had a good season offensively, and he was, I think, top 3 in the National League in terms of WAR. He's a complete player who deserves to be a 90 overall. The Diamondbacks' catching situation is a fun one because this was clearly Gabriel Moreno's spot going into the year, but Adrian Del Castillo snatched his chain. He was also top 5 in the NL in terms of WAR. Moreno got injured earlier in the season, and by the time he came back, he lost his job. And he was pretty mediocre when he played to begin with. Now, if we're going to reward guys for playing well, we've got to punish players for not performing well. Bobby Witt Jr. was a disappointment this year. Now, that's not to say he wasn't good, but he didn't play like a 99, 98 overall. He's still one of the best players at his position in the league at a 96, but he's going down along with many players on this Royals team. Guys like Cole Ragans, Vinny Pasquantino, Salvador Perez, Michael Garcia. They all went down because they all did not have good seasons. I think overall I probably had to have edited about 500 total players through the majors and the minors. There was a lot of them across the league. And given how bad our team was, as you can imagine, guys like Lenyn Sosa, Josh Rojas, Andrew Benintendi, their ratings went down. Jairo Iriarte went down as well, although I really focused on his durability because it never seemed like he had very long starts. It seems like he would go 3 innings and then suffer a minor injury. So I felt like his durability in particular deserved to go down because he didn't show that he can last long without getting injured. Cam Boozer I pushed down a little bit. Davis Martin went down. I mean, you don't go 1-17 by accident. I get that team record doesn't show how good of a pitcher you are, but you don't go 1-17 and have a good season. That's just not how it works. We did have some positives, though, and a lot of the guys that this team needed to play well did play well. Luis Robert was terrific in the month of September. He was one of the best players in baseball after the All-Star break, and his rating goes up a total of +7 from the start of the year to now. He was an 82 at the end of last episode and gets a +3 boost, and well-deserved. I think he had the most complete season of his career. Yeah, the WAR was a little higher than 2023, but his walk rate was way higher than it's ever been. He nearly doubled his walk total. Great power, good contact. He stayed healthy, which is a big deal. He made himself a lot of money this year, and his 2027 free agency, he's probably going to make a lot more money than we would have expected going into the season. Drew Thorpe, of course, made the All-Star team, and much of his in-season boosts already happened, but I still gave his rating an additional couple of points. He's going to be an 82 going into the year, but he's going to have to continue to play well if he wants to continue to grow. Bryce Wilson went up as well. He was one of the biggest surprises for our team this year. A couple great starts to finish out the year, and we've got a big decision to make with him, whether we look to sign him to a contract extension or trade him away. I also put a lot of emphasis in terms of many of the stats for the top prospects across the league. We saw guys like Max Clark have really good seasons. He went up as a result, but his teammate Kevin McGonigal did not have as good of a season, so he went down. For us, many of our top prospects played quite well, but most of them were in Double-A for the season, which is easier competition. Regardless, that shouldn't take away from the season that a guy like Noah Schultz had. He was terrific, and he showed some good flashes down the stretch in the big leagues. But him, Edgar Caro, and Hagen Smith, our top three prospects, were all in Double-A throughout the season. They played against inferior competition, so they were supposed to play well. And they did, to their credit, and they went up in rating as a result, but I'm more likely to give a bigger boost to guys who are playing at a higher level. However, the risk of that is if a player is rushed, say to the big leagues and struggles, then they shouldn't go up because they didn't play well. I think the decisions that teams make with their players should have negative and positive consequences, and the best example I have of this is the Phillies and Giants fast-tracking two of their top prospects to the big leagues. Both teams got very different results. The Phillies brought up Aiden Miller at the end of July, and he was awesome. Played 50 games, OPS nearing 800. WAR on the season would have panned out to be around 4 with 27 homers if he had played a full 162 games. That's really good for a guy who was a 70 overall, so his rating got a nice boost. The Phillies took a big risk by fast-tracking him, but it paid off. He was awesome. The Giants did the same with Bryce Eldridge, and it did not work out as well. He also played 50 games, but he was not very good. OPS around 600, WAR was negative. So the Giants took a gamble on one of their young stars, and it backfired, and because of that, his hitting ratings and potential goes down. It's like a wasted year of development for him, and his potential going down certainly hurts his ceiling. So while the Phillies made a risk and it paid off with Aiden Miller, and they will be rewarded for making that decision, the Giants will be punished because they made a big decision with Bryce Eldridge and it backfired. We mostly played things safe, keeping guys like Noah Schultz, Braden Montgomery, Hagen Smith, and Edgar Caro in Double-A. But we might not always keep things safe. For instance, fast-tracking Kyle Teal up to the big leagues where he was pretty average. I didn't really touch many of his ratings because he kind of met the expectation. As I said within 2 minutes of the first episode, I want to make this series as realistic but also as unpredictable as possible, and the 6 unique elements of the series is how I'm doing that. There's one more that we have not yet revealed though, and it might be the most exciting one. So part of running the Chicago White Sox is that you have to work under one of the worst owners in sports, in Jerry Reinsdorf. And as you can tell by the budget here, there's not a lot of money that goes into this team because, quite frankly, the owner does not really care. Now, in MLB The Show franchise, that doesn't really matter. But in this franchise, it does. Working under Jerry Reinsdorf is a major challenge. And we are going to show that challenge by presenting Jerry's Offseason Wheel. There's a second wheel being added to the series with mostly negative scenarios. We're going to spin this wheel twice per offseason, and it's going to give us 2, I guess, unique challenges that we have to follow. We're going to spin it a little bit later in today's episode after we go through the standings, major stats and awards, and then the postseason as we look to crown our first World Series title of the series. Who could have expected this? The White Sox are not in the postseason. I know, shocking. But I think our playoff field this year is really competitive. You've got some great teams in the AL. The AL Central was very competitive, really up until the month of September, where the Detroit Tigers ended up taking it and running with it, winning 94 games, winning the division's title, and being the only playoff team here as Minnesota and Cleveland with 85 wins miss out. Baltimore, I think, is the team to beat. They would be my pick for the World Series. They won, tied for an MLB best 100 games, with the Red Sox and Rays also making it in. The Rangers won 100 games as well. They will be the number 1 seed, while the Astros are the highest wild card team in the AL. As for the National League, the other 100-win team was the Philadelphia Phillies. So 3 teams in the triple digits in wins this year. The Braves are the wild card spot as well. The Brewers were fantastic this year. Them and the Reds in a tight battle for the NL Central, with the Pirates grabbing that last spot. And then the Dodgers ended up winning the NL West as expected. But they are only the 3 seed. The Brewers and Phillies both finished ahead of them. Jose Ramirez and Xavier Edwards won their respective batting titles. Gunnar Henderson led the AL in hits. He led the AL in a lot of things. Home runs, RBIs, I think slugging, OPS, WAR. He was the best player in baseball this year, with both Shohei Ohtani and Aaron Judge missing time due to injuries. Vladimir Guerrero, by the way, he's now a third baseman. I switched his position so that way he would ask for more money in free agency. Andres Gimenez led the league in at-bats, which is pretty pathetic considering he was so bad offensively. He's an elite defensive player, yet his WAR was still negative. How did he get nearly 700 at-bats? Gunnar Henderson, as I mentioned, led the league in home runs. Mark Vientos led in the NL. Pete Alonso was kind of disappointing this year as OPS started with a 6. But the Mets had their new Pete Alonso with Mark Vientos, who, as you'll see in a little bit, ended up winning the National League MVP, even though his WAR was way lower than last year. Gunnar Henderson led in RBIs, only 2 triple-digit RBI guys in the AL. Gunnar also led in runs, while Marcell Ozuna led in runs and RBIs in the NL. David Hamilton led the AL in stolen bases, while Bryce Terang had nearly 60. I told you he was really good. Yordan Alvarez and Kyle Schwarber led the league in walks. Yandy Diaz and Xavier Edwards in on base. Edwards had the highest on-base percentage in baseball. Good for him. What a year for the youngster. Gunnar Henderson finished 70 points higher than anyone in terms of slugging and 50 points higher than anyone in terms of OPS. I told you I had a pretty good year. You'll never guess who led all of baseball in WAR. It was Gunnar Henderson, with Luis Robert finishing in 4th in the American League, only behind Gunnar, Jose Ramirez, and Corey Seager. That's some pretty good company. Mookie Betts, meanwhile, led the way in the NL. It was a lot closer with guys like Bryce Terang and Adrian Del Castillo, as we mentioned earlier. Vladimir Guerrero was only at a 3.5 at first base, but after moving his position to third, it went up to a 6.5. As for wins, Tyler Glasnow and Eric Fetty led their respective leagues. Framber Valdez had the best overall record, though, 19-4. I would say he was the best overall pitcher in the majors this year. He ended up winning the AL Cy Young, and he's a free agent at the end of the year. It came at the right time. He's going to make a lot of money this year. Another guy who had a great season was Chris Martin. First-time All-Star at 38 years old. And for older players, if you're going to play well into your late 30s, I'm going to let your rating continue to be high. He had a career year. He shouldn't regress. I ended up pushing his rating up because he played so well. Framber Valdez was atop the AL in ERA, with Drew Thorpe coming in 4th. Thorpe actually would have led the NL, interestingly enough. Garrett Crochet only allowed 11 home runs. If Valdez was not the best pitcher in the big leagues this season, I think it was Crochet. The Red Sox are very happy with how this trade turned out, and I think it's going to work out for us as well. Kyle Teal was pretty good. Brady Montgomery I'm excited about. Chase Mydroth and Wilkeman Gonzalez are still 2 very good prospects. But the Red Sox, it seems like that trade was a grand slam for them with how good Crochet was. A few guys led in the NL, including our good friend Kyle Harrison. Jacob deGrom and Shane McClanahan lead the AL in strikeouts. deGrom was good but not great, so his rating went down a little bit, but he's still a 91. If not for me coming in, he would have been probably in the low 80s, because old players go down way too fast sometimes in this game. Paul Skeens led the NL in strikeouts. Framber Valdez led in innings with over 224. Zach Eflin had a really good season, him and Crochet at the top of the walks list, while Jameson Taillon only allowed 23 for the Cubs. Tarek Skubal, Bailey Ober, and Sonny Gray were the only 3 players with a whip below 1. Garrett Crochet led the way in pitching WAR by a lot. I'm surprised Framber Valdez was a full point below him. He probably should have been just as high as Crochet and Tarek Skubal. As for the awards, Gunnar Henderson wins the MVP in the American League, while, as I mentioned earlier, Mark Vientos wins it in the NL. Gunnar's WAR was 3 times higher than Vientos, who finished 50th in the NL in batting WAR, whereas Gunnar Henderson finished in 1st. Framber Valdez wins the Cy Young. I feel like Garrett Crochet should have been at least on the list somewhere. While in the National League, it is Tyler Glasnow of the Dodgers. Jose Ramirez and Xavier Edwards win the batting titles, as I said earlier. Chris Martin and Alexis Diaz win the Relievers of the Year, Alexis narrowly beating out his brother Edwin Diaz. Kobe Mayo wins the Rookie of the Year. Kyle Teal, not on the list, but if not for that really bad stretch in August, I think he actually could have won it. while Griffin Conine takes into the NL Gunnar Henderson and Juan Soto in the Hank Aaron Awards. And our only finalist was Luis Robert, finishing in 5th for an AL Silver Slugger spot in the outfield. Nobody else hit the top 3 of anything, which I think kind of shows us where this team is. So that now brings us to the playoffs. In the wild card round, we've got the Astros and the Red Sox, the Tigers and the Rays, the Reds and the Braves, and the Dodgers and the Pirates. So let's simulate forward, see what happens. Not a lot of super exciting series. The Astros sweep Boston. The Rays sweep the Tigers. I'm sad. The Braves beat the Reds in 3, and then the Dodgers take care of business against the Pirates. The following series were also not that exciting. The 4 higher-seeded teams all won, and we had no Game 5s. So it'll be the Orioles and the Rangers in the AL, and then the Phillies and the Brewers in the NL. If nothing else, it feels like we're going to have a very deserving champion with the 3 teams who won 100 games, and then the Brewers who won 97. Kind of like the Final Four in real life. The build-up to it isn't that exciting, but these last few games are going to be really good. These are the 4 best teams in baseball, and they definitely deserve to be here. The Rangers and the Phillies will be our World Series as both the NL and ALCS go 7. But the Rangers end up beating Baltimore, including an impressive 6-0 shutout win led by Jacob deGrom, who has turned back the clock. And then in Game 7, they won 4-1. Kobe Mayo, the rookie, went deep, but many of Baltimore's stars, including the MVP Gunnar Henderson, all struggled while Zach Eflin took the loss. Jock Peterson homered, drove in a pair, and Cody Bradford went 7 innings, only allowing 2 hits. As for the NL, I think the biggest story here has to be Aaron Nola, who had 3 of the 4 wins in this series, including a shutout in Game 4. The only runs for the Phillies came off of a 3-run homer in the 8th by Bryson Stott. Then they had to win Games 6 and 7 at home, and they did. Christopher Sanchez leading the way here in Game 6 against Milwaukee. Not a great start for Aaron Savale. And then homers for Turner, Harper, Kepler, and Castellanos. As for Game 7, Aaron Nola shuts the door. Nola in 4 postseason starts is 4-0. He's averaged 7 innings per outing. Bryce Terang had 2 hits. The rest of the team had 3. Homers for Turner, Real Muto, Castellanos, and Brandon Marsh. So that brings us to a Rangers and Phillies World Series. 2 teams who are no stranger to the big game. The Rangers just won the World Series 2 years ago, but their roster has actually changed a lot. Signing Jacob deGrom, adding Wyatt Langford through the draft, getting Jake Burger from the White Sox for close to nothing, adding guys like Chris Martin and Jock Peterson last offseason. The Phillies, meanwhile, their roster is a lot more similar to the team who made and lost the World Series a few years ago. I want to look at Aaron Nola's numbers, though. He is on a historic run. Him and Jacob deGrom with the Rangers are putting up some of the most impressive statistical postseasons I've ever seen from a pitcher. So in Game 1, it'll be deGrom against Zach Wheeler. Hug a nearby Mets fan as the Phillies win it 3-2. Nola on the bump against an all-time postseason performer, Nathan Eovaldi, and the Rangers tie the series at 1. Nola with his first loss. Pivotal Game 3 goes to the Rangers. They win a blowout on the road, 12-2, out-hitting the Phillies 20-5. 4 hits for Seager, home runs for Young and Kyle Higashioka. A rough start for Christopher Sanchez and a rough game from the bullpen. Ranger Suarez, the impending free agent, has not pitched an inning of postseason baseball, and that rust hurt him in Game 4. The Phillies lose to the Rangers. Zach Wheeler and the Phillies keep it alive in Game 5, and now the Phillies are going to turn it to Aaron Nola for Game 6. An impressive final home game for the Phillies, but they're going to have to win 2 in Texas to stop the Rangers. Eovaldi versus Nola in Game 6, and the Texas Rangers are our first World Series champion of this series. They defeat the Phillies in 6 games. Not a great World Series for Aaron Nola. Looks like he didn't really deserve the hype. As Nathan Eovaldi leads the way for Texas, Jock Peterson wins the postseason MVP. What a year for him. I mean, he was fantastic all year, and it carries over to October. Trey Turner wins it in the NL, and Evan Carter wins the World Series MVP. What a career he has had. In 2023, as a 20-year-old, took the league by storm, and a big reason why they won the World Series. Struggled in the regular season last year and this year, but in the postseason, he was awesome, particularly the World Series, where he leads the Rangers to their 2nd title of the last 3 years. So now that sends us here to the offseason. We do have a retirement, and it's not for an older guy. Juan Carrera, who suffered Tommy John at the beginning of the year. I guess there was something wrong with his surgery or something. He's planning to retire. A top 20 prospect in our system. That is really unfortunate. Charlie Morton retires. Paul Goldschmidt regressed a lot. I mean, he's completely washed. And he suffered an injury, which leads to his retirement. A lot of injuries. Yasmani Grandal, Mitch Haniger, Jesse Chavez retires. I expect we'll see him in Braves camp by March. Miguel Rojas retires because of an injury. Justin Verlander at 43 years old retires. Yu Darvish, I would say, is really the only surprise here. Not that he was that good this year, but because of his contract, he's still had a while to go on that big deal with the Padres. Jose Abreu retires. Legendary Chicago White Sox, won an MVP in the shortened 2020 season. One of the best hitters in all of baseball over the last decade period. Other notable names here include Matt Carpenter, former White Sox Johnny Cueto, who had a nice 2022 season with the Sox. Yuli Gurriel. Rich Hill retires at the age of about 70. Former White Sox Dallas Keuchel retires. Jordan Lyles, former White Sox Lance Lynn. Are the White Sox the location for every washed pitcher? I guess so. Clayton Kershaw, you better get ready to learn South Side, buddy. JD Martinez retires. David Peralta is done. Above him, I thought that said Chris Sale at first. That would have been another White Sox. David Robertson retires, the longtime reliever. George Springer is done. Julio Teheran is done. And that is about it for retirements. I figure Justin Verlander is probably a lock for the Hall of Fame. Maybe Paul Goldschmidt as well. But we had no one. How does Justin Verlander not make the Hall of Fame? Like, what are we doing? So now that we've made it to the offseason, before we get to anything, it's time. Jerry Reinsdorf's offseason wheel. I'm excited to show you guys what I've put on the wheel because, again, most of them are bad. But there are some good ones here as well if we get lucky. So there's 12 different tiles here, and each tile is on the wheel twice. One of the tiles, though, I tripled, and it's on the wheel 6 times. And since we're spinning the wheel twice, there's a 1 in 2 chance we will get Jerry's World. Decrease the team budget by at least 15%. That's exactly what it sounds like. The team budget this year must go down by at least 15%. You know, that would be pretty on brand for Jerry Reinsdorf. The other tiles here on the wheel include Splash Zone. Sign a top 30 free agent. That would actually be a pretty good one. Trade request. Top 5 player on the team requests a trade. Although I will note this only applies to players with at least 3 years of MLB service. Roster shift. 35% of the projected big league roster must consist of players out of the organization. The fix is in. Simulate the MLB draft lottery twice. And we're going to have to pick the worst result. Although, we also have the opposite. Simulate the MLB draft lottery twice and pick the better result. Pressure mounting. We must trade one of our 5 best prospects for an MLB-ready player who's going to be on the big league team immediately. Youth movement. I'll calculate the average age of the players on our roster, and that number must be at least 1 less than it currently is going into the year. Conditioning meltdown. We will spin the wheel of Tommy John. We'll take a closer look at that if we land on that. And then handcuffed. All trades must be approved by Jerry Reinsdorf. So basically, before every trade I make, we're going to spin a wheel that says yes and no. And whatever the wheel says determines if we do it or not. So with that, it is time to spin that wheel. Again, we're going to spin this wheel twice today. The first one, trade request. A top 5 player on our team with at least 3 years of MLB service will request a trade. This is not one of the ones I was hoping on landing on because whoever we trade away, their value will automatically decrease because it is a public trade request. So how we're going to do this is we're going to have a separate wheel for the 5 players who fit this criteria, and whoever the wheel lands on, we must trade away. So the 5 players who are rated the highest with at least 3 years of MLB service will be going onto the wheel. Again, as I mentioned with Drew Thorpe, for instance, players who have only been in the league 1 year, they don't really request trades. So someone like him is ineligible. But the players who will be included will be Luis Robert, our very best player. That would be a bad one. Bryce Wilson will be on the wheel. Penn Murphy just hit the 3 years of MLB service mark. Andrew Vaughn will go on the wheel. And then we have a few guys who are rated 71 overall. Davis Martin and Brian Ramos have not hit the service time threshold. And then between Akil Baddoo and James Karinchak, we just traded for Baddoo. So I think James Karinchak would make a lot more sense. So he'll be the final player on the wheel. So there's a 1 in 5 chance that we land on each of these players. And whoever it lands on, we must trade away, and we cannot get maximum amount of value for them. I'm really hoping it's not Luis Robert or Bryce Wilson, because those two guys are the valuable players on this list. There's a 40% chance we get screwed here. Here we go. Let's spin the wheel. Oh, no. I'm scared. Oh, no. 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 Okay, that was close. We dodged a bullet. James Karinchak is the player we have to trade away. Now, I am a little bit disappointed because I like him for his role, and I feel like he really got better throughout the year. But he's also probably the least valuable player of the 5. So that worked out. Thank goodness it's not Luis Robert or Bryce Wilson. Now, we can still trade one of these guys if we want, but we can get maximum amount of trade value for them. As for the second wheel spin for the regular wheel, here we go. Let's see what it lands on. The fix is in. Do the MLB draft lottery twice and pick the worst result. So we're going to sim the draft lottery twice, and wherever we have the lower pick is the one that we're going to do. So in other words, the draft lottery is rigged against us. The wheel was not kind to us today, let me tell you. We have 3 exclusive rights free agents, meaning that these guys are not under team control, and we don't really have any tough decisions here. Joey Gallo had a 65% strikeout rate and 17 big league at-bats. Martin Perez has not pitched since May after suffering a fractured head, and when he did pitch, he wasn't very good. Mike Clevenger's the only guy here who had a steady role, pitching in 31 games, starting in 11, but he wasn't particularly good, and he's regressed to a 63 overall. So we're not going to bring back any of those players. As for the staff, we have vacancies with our pitching coach, first base coach, and third base coach. And I want to start to get our guys here into the staff. So for the pitching coach, we're going to look at Drew French. -1 walks per 9. I think walks per 9 is very important, but we're going to prioritize that stat anyway. So we can afford to lose walks per 9 as we get better with Ks per 9, velocity, and pitching clutch. As for first base coach, we're going to look at Ruben Stokes. -2 fielding and arm accuracy, but +2 stealing, +3 reaction. Third base, Ethan Donaldson, +2 speed, +3 durability. His -3 reaction will cancel out the +3 from our first base coach, and then -1 arm accuracy. So those are the guys we're going to go after. I don't want to spend too much on the staff, probably because Jerry wouldn't really allow me to. But I want to get guys who are also not horrible coaches. So with that, we're going to simulate into free agency. Now we're really starting to get to the good stuff. Donaldson accepts the offer for our third base coach position, while Drew French will be the new pitching coach. The first base coach, Stokes, has still yet to decide on what he's going to do. So that brings us to the start of the offseason. Free agency is open. We can select the 40-man roster, offer arbitration, and tender contracts. And of course, free agency, which we'll get to in a couple of minutes. Starting with the 40-man, we do currently have 40 players on the 40-man roster, but we're going to take some of these guys off. That includes James Karinchak, who has requested a trade from the White Sox, and we have no choice but to trade him, and we cannot get maximum value since he's publicly asking out. So I found a deal I like with the Astros. Now, we could get more if we wanted to, like a talented second base prospect, but we can't because James Karinchak has made his trade request loud and clear. I still really like this deal, though. We'll be getting right-handed reliever Hayden Wesneski. 28 years old, 69 overall with B potential, some big league experience where he's been respectable, and he was excellent in AAA this past season. As I've said throughout this series, I want to get the right guys who are in the wrong opportunity. He's a major league caliber player who is stuck in the minors. One man's trash is another man's treasure, and he's going to be treasure for us. I really want to become a serious ball club, and that starts by getting some of the 50 overall guys not on the 40-man roster, not playing for the big league team. I think the number one thing we need to improve upon is depth, because the more talented depth players we get, maybe 2 or 3 of those guys end up becoming good players for us. We're going to add Owen White to the 40-man roster. He'll have an opportunity to compete for a spot in the rotation in spring. Wilkerman Gonzalez will join the 40-man as well. I do not want to lose him to the Rule 5 draft. As for tendering contracts, this is kind of an interesting position for us because we could look to offer extensions to some of our young guys like Noah Schultz, Kyle Teal, Colson Montgomery, and certainly Drew Thorpe. And it's becoming more and more common that teams are paying their guys ahead of the curve. And it would make sense to do with a guy like Drew Thorpe. I want to be an organization that rewards our young players for playing well and giving them extensions. I don't want to overpay Drew Thorpe because he's only been good for 1 year. And his value is at an all-time high. This season could be a flash in the pan. So I want to be smart about how we do this. I don't want to give him that much money, but I think he's deserved a payday. So we're going to start with 6 years, $70 million. That'll get him through his first year of free agency along with the rest of team control. Otherwise, we're not going to offer extensions to any of our other young guys yet, and we offered pretty much everyone who was eligible a tendered contract. As for arbitration, we are going to have to let some guys go here. Bryce Wilson's not going to be one of them, obviously. But the question is, what would our arbitration hearing number be? And more so, would we look to offer him a long-term extension? Because he broke out this year. His ratings and potential took a nice boost. He could be a long-term player for us, but he wants a lot of money. Look at the bottom right. He would want around $15 million hitting the open market. That's a lot for him. He's only had one good season as a starting pitcher, and we could look to maximize his value in a trade. Now, I did have a deal lined up during the deadline with the Mets for Ronnie Mauricio that I ended up getting cold feet on. The Mets wouldn't do this deal anyway now, so we would have to pivot, but I do think his value has gone up since the deadline because he was really good down the stretch, and I think we could potentially fetch out a B potential prospect for him from a contending team looking to add an arm. For now, though, we're going to offer him around $7 million in terms of arbitration. As for the other guys here, we're going to offer most of these players, but not all of them. Some of these guys, I think we're going to move on from. That includes both of these relievers, Steven Wilson and Justin Anderson. They were both bad, and part of becoming a serious team is getting a serious bullpen. That's maybe the number one priority for us. Anderson obviously had that horrible month of April, while Steven Wilson, he's just pretty blah. The other guy we're going to let go of is Josh Rojas. Through the first month of the year, he looked like a fun, gritty leadoff hitter. And then by the end of the year, he wasn't even good enough to play for the White Sox. That's pretty depressing. His slash line was scary similar to last year. Same average, same slugging, nearly the same on-base percentage. His WAR was negative 1.6, second worst on the team, which says a lot because we have a pretty bad team. I don't think it would make sense to bring him back. I think I would like to get younger in the infield. We had guys like Bobby Dalbec and obviously Brian Ramos emerge who were way better than him. So now it is time for free agency. One of the very few positives with our wheel spins today is that we didn't land on anything relating to free agency or the budget, meaning we can spend as we wish. Now, I'm not going to spend unrealistically. We're not going to sign Framber Valdez or Vladimir Guerrero or Kyle Tucker. But we can be selectively aggressive, and I want to get guys in this building who are going to change the culture. Veterans who are going to be proud to rep the Chicago White Sox and are going to lead the revolution of White Sox baseball. In terms of position players, I want guys who get on base, guys who can hit for a mix of contact and power, guys who can play a few different positions. As I said, I really want to improve the bullpen, and I wouldn't mind adding a veteran starter if possible as well. In terms of possible targets for us, in terms of pitching, Chris Paddock could be a high-end option as a starter, former top prospect who's had an up-and-down big league career, mainly because of health, but he did have a good year with the Twins. A lesser option could be a guy like John Gray. 34 years old, could be a good mentor for some of the younger guys in the rotation like Drew Thorpe and all of our prospects. As I said, we're definitely going to look to add to the bullpen. Probably not one of these all-star closers, but maybe the guys down here in the 40s and 50s. And then in terms of position players, other than catcher, I would be happy to look at just about any position because, well, we need help everywhere. We probably wouldn't sign one of these top guys again, like Guerrero, Tucker, even Luis Rengifo. But I don't mind the idea of spending big on an all-star caliber player. I want to add an impact bat. I don't want to go into the year with the same lineup we had last season and make last season a wash. In terms of the top 30 or so players in the class, I think Kyle Schwarber would kind of be exactly what I'm looking for. As a 33-year-old veteran looking to win a title, I don't know if Kyle Schwarber would want to come here. But he's a Midwest guy, University of Indiana, played with the Chicago Cubs early in his career, so he's already played in this city. Coming off a great year with the Philadelphia Phillies, hits for great power, gets on base, he just led the league in walks, and he's a vibes guy. He's a great teammate, people love him in the clubhouse, and he can kind of be the captain of our team, essentially. Another guy I would like to target is Willie Castro from the Minnesota Twins. He's a well-rounded player in the sense that he doesn't really have any major weaknesses, and he can play literally everywhere on the diamond except for catcher and first base. That versatility is going to really matter. Made the All-Star team in 2023. Didn't put up flashy numbers this year, but I would consider him to be a glue guy. Someone who can do a little bit of everything. He can play everywhere you need him to be. Even though he doesn't have one major set strength, if we need him to play center field one day, he can play center. If we need him at short, he can play short. If we need him in a corner spot, we can put him in the corner. I think that versatility, added on with the fact that he's an actual good defensive player, it's not just like he plays average defense everywhere. He's got a legitimately good glove. I think all of that combined would be kind of the perfect veteran to add. So I think these are the two guys we're really going to prioritize. Going into the year, I wanted to target a guy like Luis Rengifo. I've always been a big fan of his game, but he broke out this year. He was an all-star with the Angels, traded to the Brewers at the deadline where he was good there before getting injured in September. Now he wants a triple-figure contract. He is out of our checkbook. In terms of other options who I would look at if we don't land Schwarber or Castro, Jorge Polanco, I like his skill set. He had a great year with the Mariners. The one problem with him is that he might be the one guy in Major League Baseball who plays worse defense than Kyle Schwarber. He's coming off a season where he had about 100 errors. So I can't say I love that. Ahmed Rosario would work as well. He's a better defender than Polanco for one thing. Kind of a prototypical leadoff hitter, and he finally lived up to that upside as a former top prospect this year with the Nationals, hitting .313. Now, he doesn't draw walks. He had 9 last year, upped it to 23 this year. But he had his best season, OPS above 800, WAR above 2. So if we don't land Castro, he could be a good target, and I think he's a better offensive player than Willie Castro. We can't have all these guys on the board at the same time because otherwise their motivations are going to be really low. So I think we're going to go 2 at a time. We cannot offer these guys a contract yet, but I'm hoping we'll be able to in stage 2 of free agency. So we have made it to a new day where we can offer contracts as Ruben Stokes does accept the deal to be our third base coach. Rival opportunity. The Guardians want to bring back Josh Naylor. This is an interesting one because I like Naylor's skill set. I think he'd be a good player here. But I think Kyle Schwarber's just better. And I think Schwarber would be more interested in playing here. So I think we're going to say no. Although it is an interesting idea. He also wants more money than Schwarber, or at least a longer contract. So we can offer for Castro, but not Schwarber, which makes sense. I think given where Schwarber is in his career, he's more likely to prioritize winning, whereas Castro is going to prioritize a payday. So I think if we can offer him a lot of money, he might say yes. Especially being the White Sox, we're probably going to have to overpay a little bit in order to get these guys convinced to come here, because who goes into free agency and says, I want to play for the Chicago White Sox? We also can't spend too much money because we want to be realistic here. So we're going to simulate into the third week of free agency as the Philadelphia Phillies sign Kyle Tucker. 8 years, $275. The 100-win Phillies had arguably the best player on the market. And this loaded lineup adds a big-time piece with Kyle Tucker. Now, this could end up being a big positive for us because now they don't really need Kyle Schwarber. Tucker's going to replace his spot in the outfield, and obviously he's better than Schwarber. But now the Phillies probably are not going to offer for him, which is one less competitor for us to try to land him. The former White Sox Dylan Cease signs with the Brewers. Many of the big fish starting to come off the board. It's a lot of money for a guy who's had only one great season. But he's a good pitcher, and for a Brewers team who just won 97 games, I love seeing them being aggressive, looking to make a big swing. Now or never for Willie Castro. It seems like he's close to a deal with the Red Sox, and we've got to give him a compelling offer right now as he's set to make his decision. Coming into free agency, he was my top target because I've always figured Kyle Schwarber's pretty unlikely. Castro felt like it could actually happen. 3 years, $12.5 million, and he says no. He is going to the Red Sox. They ended up giving him a 4th year for a little bit less money per year, and probably the biggest difference is that he doesn't have to play for the Chicago White Sox. So he's going to end up in Boston. Trevor Story had an absolutely abysmal season with the Red Sox. I'm not really sure where they're going to play him still because they have Bregman, they have Christian Campbell, but he can play every position. That's one of the big pluses of his game. So Willie Castro is off the board, but we can start to offer a deal to Kyle Schwarber, and I think we're going to put somebody else in that slot next to him. I mentioned Amed Rosario and Jorge Polanco as options. If we do get Schwarber, I think it'd be pretty stupid to get him and Polanco. They are very similar players. So Amed Rosario would be the target. As for Schwarber, if we were to actually go after him, we would have to really overpay because we've got to convince him to actually want to come here. 3 years, 18.75. That's the maximum amount of money the game would let me give him. So that's going to be the offer. It would not take long for Kyle Schwarber to make a decision. He is coming to the White Sox. Wow! So we kind of land a splash. I figured if there is a year to get a guy like Kyle Schwarber, it will be this year. Because chances are, in the future, Jerry Reinsdorf is going to tell us to cut the budget. But he didn't tell us this offseason. So that kind of told me that this is our opportunity to be aggressive and make a mini splash. Even though Kyle Schwarber is not some superstar, I think he's the type of guy who would embrace playing for the White Sox. He's already won a World Series in this city for the Chicago Cubs, a young team that was built through their farm system, much like what we're trying to do. And I think he would embrace the opportunity of being a leader for us. Now, when a good player signs with a bad team like this, there are usually opt-outs in the contract. There are no options in the game this year, unfortunately, but what I'm going to do to add to the realism is I'm going to give Kyle Schwarber a player option after both the first and second seasons of the contract. So if he plays really well this year, he can leave and get more money from an even better team. Nonetheless, very excited about adding him, and I hope to add Amed Rosario as well. It's a now or never opportunity with a lot of teams interested. We offered 3 years, $31 million, and he says no. He is going to the Pirates for less money. I imagine the allure here is that instead of going to the White Sox, he is going to a playoff team. The dominoes are continuing to fall. Framber Valdez to the Diamondbacks, pairing up with Corbin Burns at the top of the rotation. They're expected to lose Zach Gallen, and now they get someone better than Zach Gallen. I would imagine $38.5 million is probably the highest AAV for a pitcher ever. So shout out to Framber Valdez. Very well deserved coming off the season that he just had. Our free agency board is now empty with Amed Rosario gone and Kyle Schwarber, surprisingly, signing with us. So now it's time to pivot. I mentioned Jorge Polanco as a guy I'm interested in, but we already have Kyle Schwarber, who's already a hilariously bad defender. We need to build the rest of the team with good defensive players to mask how bad Kyle Schwarber is in the field. I saw Manuel Rivera in here and got instantly interested. Rivera was one of the best players in minor league baseball last year. He led all of AAA in WAR. This is a guy with big league experience who was stuck on a deep Orioles team. However, I think he's good enough to play for us. Many of the top AAA guys are good enough to play for our team. And as I said earlier, one man's trash is another man's treasure. Get the right players who are in the wrong situations. Joe Ross is another guy I'm kind of interested in. I want to start looking at pitching options, and we have to make this bullpen semi-serious. I think he could be a potential starter convert, much like Bryce Wilson. Maybe unlikely, but we could try it if we want. He throws hard. He has 5 different pitches. He's coming off a good season last year with the Phillies. Played well in 2024 with the Brewers in a very similar role to how Milwaukee used Bryce Wilson in the past. I think he'd be a good option. He's not asking for that much money, and I think he's quite underrated. So we're going to offer those guys contracts during next week's set of free agency. There's one more super big fish left in this year's free agency, and that's Vladimir Guerrero Jr. He is going to leave the Reds and sign with the Dodgers. 8 years, $240 million. So basically the deal that he signed with the Blue Jays in real life, but cut in half. Instead of 15 years, it's 8. The Dodgers add another star. The rich get richer. And I cannot imagine how the Reds feel. They gave away 3 of their top 5 prospects for 2 months and 1 playoff win of Vladimir Guerrero Jr. This lineup is going to be unfair. Now, I don't really know where he's going to play, but that's a very good problem for the Dodgers to have. How do we plug in one of the 5 best hitters in Major League Baseball? I don't know. Ranger Suarez joins our division. He's a Kansas City Royal. I like that the Royals are spending, given that they had a really bad season last year. I feel like they should be more focused on offense because that was their big weakness. But Ranger Suarez is a very solid pitcher. They add another lefty, and we'll see if they end up playing better than last year. Zach Gallen to the Orioles. That's a big one. Not just because Gallen's a great player, but the Orioles are a major contender. With the Diamondbacks signing Framber Valdez, the writing was on the wall that he was going to go. But now the Orioles add a big-time starter to replace some of the guys that they might be losing. Zach Eflin, Eric Fedde, and Ryan Helsley were all huge pieces of this rotation last year, but they're all free agents, and I was worried the Orioles were not going to spend to replace them, but boy, I was wrong. Not only did they sign Zach Gallen, but they also signed Michael King, keeping them and the Rangers as the two favorites in the AL. But the Detroit Tigers decided to say, hold on, we want in as well. 6 years, nearly 140 for Luis Rengifo. I've always been a fan of his game, and coming off the year that he just had with the Angels and the Brewers, I think this is a very fair contract for Detroit, and I do not like that the best team in our division just added one of the 5 best players of this free agency class. It's a lot of money, but I think it's going to end up being worth it, and this Tigers lineup looks quite good, especially considering they also added, former Tiger, Eugenio Suarez. The infield is now going to become very crowded, in a good way, because Suarez is a good piece and Luis Rengifo is going to be here for the next 6 years. I would imagine Colt Keith, given his big contract, won't be going anywhere, but someone like Jace Young, Trey Sweeney, or Kevin McGonigal in the minors, those guys could all potentially be expendable. Maybe Bryce Rayner as well, their first rounder in 2024. I could see any of those guys being available for possibly another arm to add to the rotation, or maybe one more big-time bat. So we're going to offer contracts now for Rivera and Joe Ross. Neither of them want a lot of money, which is very good. We are looking for cheap, under-the-radar players who other teams aren't really thinking about, but are going to be major upgrades to what we ended up having last year. More dominoes would continue to fall in early December. The Orioles not only lose Ryan Helsley, but to arguably their biggest competition in the AL. He signs with the Rangers, who are probably going to end up losing Chris Martin. Now they get someone who's younger and probably better than Chris Martin. So this kind of works out. Contract decision for Joe Ross. Sock it to me! I'm signing with the White Sox. I didn't know we were signing a freak! You know, now that I think about it, it kind of makes sense. He does sort of look like the Gunaside guy. And I'm happy that he's our freak. I think he's going to be a really good addition for us to the bullpen. Emmanuel Rivera, sock it to me! He's also a freak. But he's also, more importantly, a Chicago White Sox. I think he's a guy who could play every day for us. He didn't play in the big leagues at all last year, but again, that's because the Orioles had so much talent in the infield, and their minor leaguers are going to be better than a lot of our major leaguers. So we've done a good job of filling out this roster. We've added to the lineup. We added a real impact bat with Schwarber and another pretty good player in Rivera. We added the bullpen, but we need another starter. Whether or not we keep Bryce Wilson, because outside of Thorpe, Cannon, and if Bryce Wilson is here, I don't think there's any other locks to make the rotation. Noah Schultz, Hagen Smith, those guys are going to have to earn their spots. Owen White, Davis Martin, those guys are competing to pass them. Prelander Baroa, who was out last year with Tommy John, he's a guy to potentially watch out for as well. I'm not necessarily looking for a high-end starter, but a guy who can potentially eat innings for us. Not even at the level of Chris Paddock or John Gray, but someone further down the board. Someone like Bailey Falter from the Pirates. Much like Emmanuel Rivera, he was up for arbitration, but Pittsburgh decided to let him go. I think this is actually the best part of free agency for us. Looking at the under-the-radar younger guys, like Falter, who are in the midst of arbitration, who teams did not want to pay, who we will want to pay because they're better than the guys that we have already. So Falter's the only guy we're going to add onto the list for now as we get closer to winter meetings. The Rule 5 draft is coming up, and again, that's another opportunity for us to add under-the-radar players who nobody else is going to want, but will also be beneficial for our team as well. I think we can really get some impact out of the Rule 5 draft. But along with socking it to Scott Boras, there's one other thing we have to go through during the winter meetings. Oh, great. The draft lottery. I would have been a lot more excited about this if not for the wheel spin earlier. So we're going to go through the draft lottery twice, and wherever we end up with the lesser pick is the one we're going to end up doing. So here's our first spin. You have got to be kidding me. We have fallen from number 1 to number 7. We don't even need to do a second spin because this is the lowest we could have fallen. That is unbelievably unfortunate. So, despite having the worst record in the league 2 years in a row and combining for 100 wins over the last 2 seasons, we will have picks 10 and 7 to show for it. Now, I'm going to do the draft lottery again just for show, but this one's not going to count because we already have worst case scenario. Second time around, we land pick 3. That would have been a lot better than pick 7. But unfortunately, we have to pick the worst of the 2. So the White Sox will be picking 7th in the first round of the 2026 MLB draft. God hates us. Let's continue to simulate now through December. Zach Eflin back with Baltimore. So Eflin, Michael King, Zach Gallen, Kyle Bradish. That's a great 4. I'm curious to see who the number 5 will be. You'd think it would be Grayson Rodriguez, but he was quite disappointing this past season. And that brings us to the Rule 5 draft, a great opportunity to add some under-the-radar players who teams don't really want, but are better than the guys we have. And luckily, the results of the draft lottery do not impact the draft order here. We do with the first pick. Cody Hosey was a first-rounder back in 2019. He's been a highly regarded prospect for a while with the Dodgers, now with the Royals. But at 28 years old, he's never gotten the chance in the big leagues. He's coming off a good season, though, in the minors, and I think he's a major league caliber player, and he could get some real playing time on our team. In the second round, we're going to look to add to the bullpen. Enoli Paredes is a guy with pretty good big league experience, a little over 50 innings pitched. He has a career ERA at 3. Now, his walk rate throughout his career has been really bad. It's given him a high whip. But his walks per 9 rating is in the 50s. It's really not that bad. All of a sudden, the bullpen looks a lot more respectable with Joe Ross, Hayden Wesneski, and now Enoli Paredes, who are all better than any of the goofballs we had in the pen last year, other than Penn Murphy. We're going to skip through the remaining picks, but I think we made good use of the Rule 5 draft. We added a potential corner infield bat and a good relief option. Rival opportunity, the Twins are interested in Aaron Savale, a name we know quite well on this channel. We had him for a couple seasons in the Giants franchise last year where he was quite good. I don't want to spend big money on a pitcher right now, though, so I guess he might end up back in the AL Central. We are going to offer a contract to Bailey Falter, but first, the free agency class has changed quite a bit. A lot of the guys across the league who were not offered arbitration by their current teams are now in the free agency pool. Now, most of these players are not going to be very wanted across the league, but this is our opportunity to fill out the roster with guys who are hungry to get a roster spot and compete in spring training. Now, we could cheese a little bit, go after some solid players like Matt Vierling, per se. I'm not really sure why he's available, even though he's coming off a negative WAR season. But I'm looking for guys who are hanging on for dear life. Like, the only team who would take a chance on them is us. The first player I'm going to look at is infielder Andrew Monasterio with the Milwaukee Brewers. Once upon a time, he was looked at as a pretty highly regarded prospect, but at 28 years old, it just hasn't really panned out. He played a big role for the Brewers last year, and he wasn't very good. Not a great offensive player, but solid defensively, high clutch rating, draws a lot of walks. And then the other player I'm going to go after is a familiar face if you've been around the channel, Jesus Sanchez, who we know from our Marlins series in MLB 23 and with the Guardians in MLB The Show 22. Jesus Sanchez was god-awful with the Marlins last year. -2 WAR. He sucked. There's a reason why they let him go. Put it that way. I still see the talent with him, though. He hits righties well, solid plate skills, great defensive player, and I think he can rebound to what he was a couple years ago. Back to Bailey Falter, we're going to offer 1 year, $3 million. He says yes, and he's not a freak, but he is ready to take his talents to the south side. Rival opportunity for Jordan Montgomery. The Twins are clearly starting pitching hunting. I don't think we're interested, though. I'm not looking to spend big money now. I'm looking for these under-the-radar guys like Jesus Sanchez, who we're going to offer a 1-year deal to. His motivation is super high. It seems like he really wants to come here. Do I look like an elephant to you? Because I don't work for peanuts. Feel free to get back to me with a serious offer. In the meantime, good luck trying to rebuild my motivation. Damn. That's crazy, because the Marlins would have been better off sticking a literal elephant in right field than you, buddy. Despite being insulted, I'm still interested in signing him, but I only want to do 1 year, much like Bailey Falter. If it doesn't work, I want to get out of the contract quickly. Okay, at least he's not being insulting this time. This offer's not quite what I'm looking for, but we're not too far apart. I'm not going to budge on going more than 1 year, though. Jonathan Loizaga's agent gives us a call. I think he's a good player, but he's only thrown 3 innings in the last 2 years, so I think I'm going to pass on that. We're going to up the offer for Sanchez a little bit, and now we can start to offer for Andrew Monasterio, who's now a little bit interested. 1 year, 1.5. He's going to be really cheap, but he doesn't accept, although we're not too far off. Jesus Sanchez does accept. The only thing that was missing was me signing with the Sox. So he's clearly really excited about this new opportunity after a very bad season last year with the Marlins. He's going to have to compete for playing time, as will just about everybody on this roster. But I think there's still some upside with him. Oscar Colas is basically a worse version of Sanchez, so we're going to take him off the 40-man. And then to clear up another spot, I'm going to be acquiring Zane Mills, a 25-year-old pitching prospect from the Cardinals, for Lenyn Sosa, who was very bad last year. But I think there is some value with his game, given how well he hits lefties. I still think there's room for him to be a quality big leaguer. I just don't think it's going to be here, especially for a Cardinals team who has talent, but question marks currently at second base. We're going to go back to Andrew Monasterio. I'm going to up the offer a little bit, and to add a roster spot for him, we're going to take Tyler Gilbert off. He would end up being claimed on waivers by the Rays, which is fine. I was not overly attached to Tyler Gilbert. We do sign Andrew Monasterio. The only thing that was missing was me. Why is everybody a copycat? Did we just sign Jason Tatum or something? Nonetheless, I'm excited about the addition of Monasterio. And again, since it's only 1 year, if it doesn't work, we can let him go. Hobie Milner's agent is going to give us a call. I don't think he'd be the worst guy to get. He is a lefty, which we do kind of need. But I think we've already spent too much money for Jerry's liking. Let's look at free agency across the league. Some interesting signings here, including Paul Sewald going to Atlanta. German Marquez returns to the Rockies. The Guardians at Tyro Estrada. Esteury Ruiz to the Cardinals. MJ Melendez to the Rays. The Phillies with some big additions to the bullpen. They signed Miguel Castro and Raisel Iglesias. Clayton Kershaw leaves the Dodgers. He's an athletic. Mike Tauchman to the Giants. James Karinchak to the Marlins. So the Astros, after trading for him, could not agree to arbitration. So we got Hayden Wesneski for free. Mike Soroka gets a big deal with the Cardinals. The Guardians signed Jose Caballero and Jorge Polanco. How many middle infielders do they need? That's 3 who they've signed. Matt Vierling to the Rays, Elias Diaz to the Tigers, Gleyber Torres to Seattle, Devin Williams returns to the Yankees. The Guardians get back Lane Thomas, Luis Arraez to the Brewers, Marcelo Zuna to the Twins. That's a nice get for them. Eric Fetty goes to the Mets, JT Realmuto back in Philadelphia, and Bo Bichette ends up with the Pittsburgh Pirates. So now that all the notable free agents have just about signed here in early February, it's time for the arbitration hearings. The big one, though, for Bryce Wilson, and ultimately the panel would end up signing with Wilson, meaning that he's going to be making $12.6 million this year. That is a lot of money, and that's a preview of what would be to come if we end up signing him to an extension. The only guy not under contract is Drew Thorpe. He never took the 6-year, $70 million deal. We're going to hold hope that eventually happens. If not, we're just going to tender his contract because obviously we do not want to let him go. So that's now $112 million tied up in salaries. We actually have a log jam at a few different positions, but we're going to break up those log jams real quick. Andrew Benintendi, we are going to DFA. He is into the 4th year of his 5-year, $75 million deal. He had a negative WAR last year, and I am looking to replace him. I think we have improved in the outfield. Obviously, Kyle Schwarber's a big get. Jesus Sanchez as well. There's just not a spot for him. We're going to pay him, instead of playing baseball, to sit on the beach in Boca. As for Andrew Vaughn, we're going to be trading him to the Arizona Diamondbacks. They need a first baseman, and I'm looking to move off of Vaughn, who's been kind of the same player since all the way back his rookie year in 2021. For better or worse, he hasn't really changed, and I'm not looking to extend him after this year. I like the return we're getting back from Arizona, including outfield prospect Jack Hurley, 23 years old, 3rd rounder a couple years ago, smooth lefty stroke, and then Kyle Nelson. I really wanted to add a lefty arm to the bullpen. He's a guy who did not pitch in the big leagues last year, but was good in the minors, has some major league experience with Arizona and Cleveland, and I like his ratings. So I think he's a guy who can compete for a spot on the big league roster and potentially look to make the team out of spring. We have one more trade planned. I will be trading away Bryce Wilson. I don't want to give him an extension. He's asking for $15 million a year, and that's such a gamble for a guy who's only had one good season. Now, based on his overall ratings, I think that success could be sustained. But I'm not going to bet on it. And I would rather add an impact prospect for him. The San Diego Padres, I think, by far need him the most. They lost both Michael King and Dylan Cease. They didn't replace either of them. Their fifth starters is 69 overall. I like this deal for us. I think it makes a lot of sense for both sides. They're going to be getting Kai Busch along with Bryce Wilson. Busch is a guy who could compete to make their bullpen somehow as an innings eater. I'm a little concerned with him coming off of Tommy John, and I'd rather get younger and better. So he's going to be going to the Padres with Bryce Wilson, who adds to the team's floor drastically because all of a sudden they now don't have a gigantic hole in the rotation. The big get for us is going to be starting pitching prospect Jagger Haynes. Fifth rounder in 2020, another lefty. We have a lot of lefty arms, but he had a great season for San Diego last year for their Double-A team. He's on the 40-man roster. I think he's only a couple years away from being a big leaguer, and I think he's a fringe top 100 prospect right now. He's really good. Cobb Hightower, third rounder in 2024, is a raw infielder, but only 20 years old. I think there is some intriguing upside with him. So those are two pretty good prospects we're getting back for Bryce Wilson, along with Kai Busch as well, who's not a throw-in. He's a legitimate piece for the Padres. And all of a sudden, the team looks a little bit more clear. The one question is, who's going to play first base? Emmanuel Rivera, Bobby Dahlbeck, and Brian Ramos can all play first. But I actually think Kyle Schwarber might be the better fit. In 2025 spring training with the Phillies, he did a lot of experimenting at first base, so it actually kind of makes sense. We're not going to necessarily throw him to the position right away. He's going to play there in the spring for us this year, and he's going to platoon at first base for us, at least to start the regular season. And if he plays well there, we're going to play him regularly at that spot. Going into the spring, pretty much everybody here is competing for playing time, other than Kyle Schwarber, Luis Robert, and maybe Brian Ramos. None of these guys are even guaranteed to be on the big league roster. Pitching rotation, it's similar. I think Drew Thorpe and Jonathan Cannon are pretty safe. Everybody else, including the prospects who are not here, like Noah Schultz and Hagen Smith, they've got to live up to it. We're going to add Hagen Smith, Douglas Cato, and Edgar Caro to the 40-man roster as well. I want to see what those guys can offer in the spring. So we're going to put Miguel Vargas and Jared Schuster on waivers, while those three guys will be added to the 40-man. And I think that's just about where we're going to wrap things up here. I'm going to have off-season trades for the other teams across the league early in next episode, and I think that's where I'm going to explain exactly what I'm going to do with international free agency as well. Now, there is one more thing I have to do real quick. Drew Thorpe never ended up agreeing to the extension. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to continue talks with him, but for now we're going to tender his contract to just play it safe with him because obviously I don't want to let him go. Otherwise, hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know what you thought of our offseason down below in the comments. Next time around, we'll be kicking off season number 2. I'm excited to get things started with our new team, and I hope you guys are as well. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you are new. Peace out.